Hi, everybody. Welcome to Art World Up Close podcast. My name is Devon Vander Voort, and I am so happy to have you with me here today. Welcome to this podcast. If you are new, this podcast is for people who are in the art world, working in the art world, want to be a part of the art world. Maybe you are a current student studying art history and museum studies, or you're an artist, collector, or just somebody who really loves the art world and wants to know more. I started this podcast because there are so many different facets of the art world that I think we all deserve to know, and I wanted to really zoom in on all these different functions of the art world through this podcast, giving everybody an up-close, personal look into the art world. Aside from the podcast, I'm an art advisor. I own an art advisory business. We work with private collectors, corporate collectors, and artists. We help them build and maintain their fine art collections. So I've had the privilege of working from both the artist side, the collector side, with museums, different institutions and foundations. And a large part of being an art advisor is keeping my eye on the art market. That's something that I really wanted to focus on today. There's a lot going on in the art market in 2026, and what I really wanted to do is look at some of the things that people are talking about and break them down for you as we think about where the art world is going and where it's been. So I know that a lot of my listeners are current art students. Maybe you're studying art history, something adjacent, also museum studies. And I have an undergraduate degree in art history and a master's degree in museum studies. And both of those degrees really did give me a great foundation to starting my advisory. And so if you are a current student, I really wanted to have an inside scoop on everything that was going on. I was really hungry when I was in art school, and I hope that this podcast is a platform that you can come back to time and time again, that you can ask questions of the art world and of me, and we can go digging and exploring together. You know, being an art advisor means constant market monitoring and always have your finger on the pulse of what's for sale, what's being sold, what's at museums. And I wanted to highlight all of those different things on this podcast as well. And so throughout visiting galleries, visiting art fairs, all these different things, those are things that I really want to share with you guys as well. And so if you don't have a strong understanding right now of how the art world functions, it is very unique. No art sale is alike, right? So you could sell one thing and you sell another, and they all vary in who you're selling them to, who's buying. There are collectors that own their own artwork. There are museums that have collections. There are artists who have studios and they're making art. But how do all of these different things sort of fit together like a puzzle? And the art world and the art market's job is keeping track of all of that movement. So when you think about some of the different players involved, you can think about auction houses, gallery sales, private sales, all these different avenues of selling artwork. So there's so much that I want to share. The art world is a fast-paced, nuanced machine, and sometimes you have to be in it or looking at it directly to really understand what's going on underneath all of it. So this is a podcast that, you know, is really aiming to do that, right? To go up close. And so I hope that you get an inside glimpse to this glamorous world, but also this world that is incredibly hard to pinpoint and narrow down. I like to think of the art world as like you're inside of a game where you think you know the rules, but everybody seems to be playing a different game. And I love that notion. And I really do want to talk about, you know, the state of the art world in 2026. So I'm going to just share some different things that have been circling in the news. So this fact comes from the art newspaper. Back in May, Sotheby's, Christie's, and Phillips raised an aggregate $2.5 billion with fees from their various evening and day sales. And that figure was actually double from what it was the previous May. So the art market, since COVID, it went really up and then it's sort of been in a downward spiral. And those figures are huge numbers, right? Like $2.5 billion worth of art being sold in 1 month in the New York sales is humongous. And so when we think about that, is that an accurate way to look at the art market and determine, is it in an upturn? Are these sales successful? Does this mean that people are buying again? And the thing to remember when you're looking at art market data is it's really hard because, one, when things get sold at auction, you don't always know who they're being sold to. So you can't say that this particular piece got sold to a museum, private collector, a foundation. You have no idea unless you go to a museum a couple months later and you see the piece there. So it's really fun, tracking all of this different things, but it's also incredibly important to understand that auction data as a metric for the success of the art world isn't always the best way to go off of what the success of the art world looks like and what the market looks like. Another thing that I wanted to discuss on here that has been really in the news a lot is galleries laying off their staff and their artists. So there have been several galleries that have recently announced that they are going to pare down their artist roster, and they're also laying off a bunch of staff. And this is sort of, as we talk again about geopolitics, something that is really hard because it almost feels like a perfect storm because there are rising costs for everything, right? So to break this down further, if you're a gallery that's in New York and you are paying rent on a space in New York, your rent is likely going up. And then you have to think about the cost for employing people, right? So you have to pay salaries, health benefits, which are also going up. You have to think about shipping artwork, right? And the cost of lumber is going up. And so if you have to make a crate for a specific type of piece, that price point is going to go up too. And then if you think about the added enormity that is the cost of shipping things domestically and internationally, in addition to the crate, if you are selling a piece and it sells to a collector that's overseas, the price point for that crate to get shipped across the pond or anywhere else is going to be incredibly raised and higher. So you're thinking about all of this, and then you're thinking about the buyers that are also buying at a lower rate, right? The economy being in a downturn, that is signaling to us that, there is always this balance of supply and demand in the art world. And thinking about where the buyers are, right? Are they selling more or are they buying more? And that also, unfortunately, leads to just inherently by human nature a distrust in the gallery system. If artists are being represented and they have their trust placed into a gallery to make a living for them or make additional income, and then the gallery has to close. Because we all want to be wishful thinkers and we all want to think that a gallerist or a dealer, especially mega galleries, are going to do every single thing that they can do for artists, but that is not really the truth. There is, a lot of different things that go into representing an artist, and then you also have people being laid off. So there, in addition to all of these very real storms that are happening, there is also a distrust in these systems that have been built. And that also leads to a lot of really great things. I don't want all of this to sound so incredibly negative, but there is so many new things that are popping up, new fairs, artists coming together to create galleries, people doing shows in unconventional locations. So there is this layer of a lot of creativity that is happening because those traditional models are sort of being snatched away. So thinking about things like that, I've been saying to my clients who have asked recently, the mid-market right now is tougher than low and high, right? So you have the people that are buying at a really high price point and they're not really going anywhere. They're still going to be buying at that price point. And then you have the people that are buying at the $5,000 to $10,000 range, and those people are there as well. So the gallery's closing is sort of just a sign of the times, but it's something that I think as people continue to monitor and figure out where this shift is and what this shift is, that there's going to be a lot of really incredible new systems that come out of this. And I have been this active in the gallery scene for 6 years at this point, and I have seen for the past 5 years, I want to say, a lot of the art fairs, the galleries across all major cities: New York, LA, Miami, London, Paris, all these different cities. A lot of the times you see a lot of similar work, you see the same work. And I want to say in the past year, like a lot of different things have been happening because these systems are in flux. And I think that's really exciting. And I'm excited to see where it goes. So people are taking huge chances with what they're showing. I was at the New York City Art Fairs this past May, and it was really interesting seeing what was being shown. I went to Frieze, Nada, 154, and TAFAF, and across the board there just seemed to be almost this breath of fresh air, because there were a lot of like artists I didn't recognize and new work that I hadn't seen before. And I think it was really exciting because people are taking a chance on what they're showing, because maybe the old things that they were showing and the old things they were doing weren't maybe working out, but there is this level of like, well, this is a very tumultuous time, so let's just show what we really want to show and show this really amazing art. And I think there was definitely like a level of neutrality as I was walking through the fairs, right? There wasn't anything that was so exciting to me that was just like blew me out of the water, and there wasn't anything that made me really upset and wondered why it was there. It was like this really palatable, enjoyable experience, I think, for myself and my collectors who I brought through the fairs. And I think that one of the things that I'm really proud of a lot of people in the art world for right now is people not continuing to perpetuate this idea of success. A lot of the art world is dependent on, this artist is selling out their studio and this gallery is just selling every piece they have, and everybody is so successful and nobody's struggling, and people are flying first class to, an international art fair. But I think right now people are honestly turning inward and being very honest with what they're actually capable of doing. And I think that it's refreshing to see this like level of honesty where everybody sort of understands that there is this moment that we're not going to be stuck in forever and continuing to move through it, but without this like facade of grandeur and I'm doing better than everybody else as a gallery or an artist. Because a lot of people right now are distracted. I started my company 3 years ago, and I feel like it was really easy to talk to my clients and they're always available. And right now there's just so much going on that people are not sort of always just available. There are so many other distractions, and a lot of the time when you think about a client or somebody that is active in this art world and maybe they're buying art and they have their eye on this piece and you're helping them source the piece, sometimes like maybe their rain gutter breaks, or they have somebody in their family getting married, or they're, moving, right? There's so many other things that sometimes art buying gets pushed off the table. And I think a little bit right now that's getting further pushed. So it's interesting to think about the art market in terms of the level of capacity that people have. And another thing that I want to talk to you guys about is art fairs. Art fairs, if you are new to what an art fair is, art fairs happen in multiple different cities. There usually is one happening at all times, and galleries they rent booth space to participate in them. A lot of the times for certain fairs, it's really hard to get into them. They're very heavily curated. Some of the ones that you might be familiar with hearing about are Art Basel, Miami Beach, Frieze LA, Frieze London, Frieze Masters, Expo Chicago, the Armory Show in New York in September. So there is a lot of art fairs, and there's been a lot of really interesting discourse in the art world lately about whether or not art fairs are doing what they need to do. And the reason I say that is art fairs are, I have heard, they can bankrupt galleries. They're so incredibly expensive to participate in. You want to think about all of the costs associated with an art fair. It's applying for an art fair, it is flying an entire staff out to an art fair. So there's just so many different costs associated with the fair, similarly to like moving art everywhere, that it used to be that people would participate in art fairs and then you wouldn't be able to see the work ahead of time. So that was sort of like you would be the first person seeing the piece. But now with emails and people getting PDF previews, sometimes I walk through art fairs and I've seen all of this in my inbox because I have seen all of it in my inbox, right? So there's that level of, well, why are you flying halfway across the world to go to an art fair when you could buy the same piece of art sitting on your couch? And so there is that question of why are we spending so much money as galleries, as dealers, to do art fairs? And I'm really excited because there are so many new voices and new leadership in art fairs that are really revamping what that means. Like Expo Chicago has an entire program for art museum curators that they do in tandem with the fair. They're really expanding that dialogue out. And there are other fairs that have so many social components. And so, like, that's your answer. Why are you flying across the world for an art fair? It's because you get to see a bunch of people and be in person. And it's for the experiential nature of that fair, right? So that is another reason why it's just interesting to see how where art fair participation is. There was a new art fair called Elsewhere Art Fair that Megan of Blah Blah Gallery in Philadelphia started. I think it was last month. And I wasn't able to go, but I read about it. And it is an art fair that has an accessible price point to emerging artists. And it's in a city that isn't known as an art city, but is an art city, right? And so it's like bringing people to those spaces and those places and really thinking about how people are going to experience and interact with art fairs in the next couple of years. And I think it's really exciting to see where they go and where this like next generation of art leadership takes art fairs. Because people are turning inward on their community in a nice way, right? Like you could move to New York, you could start a new art fair, but it's really special that if you are in a different city, if you're even in a small city or a mid-sized city or a small town, and there's like these nuggets of opportunity for people to create new fairs, new shows, because it'll genuinely serve their community and not feel the need or pressure to be this big thing on a global stage. And I think there's room for both of those things, but I'm really excited to see where that goes and all of the new fairs that are popping up. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is shifting gears a little bit away from what's going on in the art world, but the changing habits of Gen Z. A couple years ago, I did a presentation at Soho House Chicago on just that, and it was a couple years ago, so even the things that I think Gen Z is thinking about now have changed. Elder Gen Zs, such as myself, are in their late 20s now and are really thinking strategically and intently about collecting, and I wanted to just talk to you guys about some of the changing buying habits that are present within Gen Z. So the most obvious one and the most talked about one is how social media is changing the game, right? You do not have to fly to New York and take the E-train to Chelsea and go into a gallery and look at something on a wall and make the purchase and ship it to your house and get back on the E-train. You don't have to do any of that. You can just go on Instagram and DM the artist directly. And maybe you've seen the process videos that are on Instagram Reels. You feel like, I know this piece, I feel comfortable buying this piece. And you don't have to necessarily, depending I'll add this caveat, depending on the artist's, agreement with their galleries, if they have any. You don't have to necessarily go through the gallery. You have direct, immediate access to any artist that you could possibly want because of social media. And so that does really change the fundamental buying practices within the art world that are very traditional. And so that just like level of access to people, and then also feeling like you're buying a piece of art because you are connected to that person through social media is very different. A lot of the times people buy art and they might not really know a lot about the artist. They don't know, what their family looks like, or what they ate for dinner last night, or, where they're going on vacation. But because of social media, you can really feel like you know that artist. And when you care about somebody, you want to support their artistic practice, right? When you want to support creative people, you can do that. So that's something that I think Gen Z is doing a really lovely job doing. I see a lot of influencers whenever they're engaging with art or they're like decorating their house, they always say like, I commissioned this artist, she's also on TikTok. And I think that's just like really speaks to how the global economy of buying and selling art has changed. And it's also going back to that experience of like you feel emotionally attached to this piece. And just a side note on that, I will say if you can meet the artist that you're buying work from, do that, even if it's a Zoom, FaceTime. Almost all of the artists in my collection, my own collection, I have met and talked to, because that just warms your heart as a collector to have something on your wall and say like, I know this person, knows my story, knows who I am. It's just super valuable. So the next thing I want to talk about too with Gen Z is, and I talked about this a little bit before with the art fairs, is the experiential market. So that is people being in spaces where they're just having such a good time that they feel like they want to buy art because everybody's doing it and, it's a great time. I curated an exhibition last fall. And at that exhibition, it was in a small to mid-sized city, but everybody was having so much fun at this event that we nearly sold out on the pieces because there was food and there was community and people knew each other. And it was just like such an incredible testament to, if you put a bunch of people in a room together, a bunch of good people, and great art, the work's gonna sell because everybody's coming up now, everybody's buying a piece. It's like, I'm having such a great time and the work is gonna sell. So that same ideology is being translated to art events, right? You're seeing more like cocktail hours at galleries than just a viewing. And I think that is also, us as humans need more stimulation now, need more things to really gob onto to feel like we're having a great time. And galleries, museums know this, right? This is something that they know. So really heavily curating those incredible spaces to buy art are so important. And I also think, piggybacking off of that, nostalgia is a huge thing. If you see pieces that resonate with your childhood, those are things that Gen Z is going to glob onto, because we are seeing everything marketed to us that is just revamped from our childhood, right? Like, I'm about to buy the American Girl doll cocktail and cookbook, because they are like realizing that, elder Gen Z and millennials want to be engaged with American Girl doll. I watched The Devil Wears Prada the other night. The Devil Wears Prada 2 just came out. So it's no secret that this generation is so focused on our childhood, and we don't have to get into all the reasons why. That's a whole other podcast and a whole other topic. But it's present in the art world too. People want to be around art that they enjoyed as kids. I can tell you for my own self that one of the most important exhibitions I saw when I was 10 years old was a Chihuly exhibition. And Chihuly is like top of my collecting wish list right now, right? So that's no mistake. That's like that having that Chihuly, and I'm realizing I really should just go find one because they come up to auction all the time. Having a Chihuly in my apartment would just remind me of the way that 2010 felt every time that I see it, and that is so, so awesome that it's just something that I think is really special that we can that we do have this sentimental nostalgia that we are all sort of globbing onto. And then, same thing, Gen Z wanting to build community and be a part of larger conversations, right? So many of us are socially involved and want to create art that is really moving the needle forward. It can be aesthetic and beautiful, but it's like, why am I supporting this artist? What are they saying? How are they commenting on what's going on in the world right now? What narratives are they pulling out of the closet that have never been talked about before? Gen Z does really care about those bigger topics and being a part of those larger conversations. Galleries and museums have always hosted artist talks, and right now I think they're so incredibly important. I don't think I've ever been to an artist talk that I left feeling like, well, I shouldn't have done that. I need my hour back. They're always so insightful when you hear about the process, when you hear about, why they were created, what wisdom that they had from their ancestors, or whatever it might be. The case is different for all artists, of course, but having those larger conversations is super important. Like, there's this level of context that Gen Z is craving at every level, and I think we really do see it in buying habits in the art world. So really quickly, I wanted to go through some resources to track the art market. So if you're listening to this and you're like, Devon, this is so fun, I want to listen to your podcast, but I also want to look at different resources so that I can track the art market as an artist, as a collector. So I'm going to share with you some of the things. The first one being the art newspaper. I love the art newspaper. It is a great resource for market news, and they're based in London, so they definitely have a broader global perspective. The next one is Artsy. So Artsy is a great tool if you want to know what galleries are selling, what shows are coming up, what's being sold at the fairs if you can't get on a plane, but you want to really know what's in the hall of those fairs. Artsy is really great. You can go in if you have an account and you can turn on alerts for certain artists, alerts for certain galleries, so you really are like getting in your inbox what you need to keep up with those things. ArtNet News is great. Same market data. Same with Art News. Those are similar. They're like really have concrete numbers to go off of. And then I wanted to shout out to my friend Tim Schneider, who writes The Gray Market on Substack, which is incredible. He has been on some of the greatest deep dives in the art market lately, and they're always so fun to read. So those are just some, quick resources for you if you are really interested in tracking this stuff. And I think that everybody should, and joining another newsletter never hurt anybody, but having the knowledge and being empowered as an artist, as a collector, as a student, the student thing is really important, because if you're a student, you're going to be reading and studying art. I did my degree in sort of a passive way. I didn't really think about, all of these artists that I was studying, that they're actually being sold at auction right now. So if you can look at art history and then also track it in the market, that's like a really fun thing to be tuned into, right? You can go to class the next day and be like, yeah, so that, that artist actually just hammered last night for X amount. And that's something that I think is really special. So I am going to leave you guys with that information. And I really am excited for, continuing to have these conversations, having more guests on the podcast. And I really want to answer any questions that you have. You can follow along with us at artworldupclose, or you can email me any questions at artworldupclose@gmail.com. Yeah, that's our email address. And I'm just really excited to continue to have these conversations. We're going to have guests. We're going to go to different spaces. We'll be recording in different galleries and museums. So I'm super happy that you spent this half hour with me, and I can't wait to see you on the next episode.